I'm Valerie Thompson, 63 years old, and everything changed when my husband Richard died suddenly of a heart attack after 40 years of marriage. The grief was overwhelming. Losing my soulmate, my provider, my entire life as I knew it. When I discovered we had almost no savings, and the house had to be sold to cover medical bills, my daughter Katherine offered her spare bedroom. I was so grateful until 3 months later when she pointed at the front door and said, "You either get a job or you're sleeping on the street." I'd love to know where you're watching from today. If my story speaks to you, please hit that like button and subscribe. Trust me, what happened next shocked even me. I met Richard Thompson during my sophomore year of college. I was studying art and he was in business school. We fell in love quickly, the kind of love where you can't imagine your life without that person. After graduation, we married in a small ceremony with family and close friends. Richard had a job lined up with an accounting firm, and I had plans to finish my art degree. But life took a different turn when I became pregnant with Katherine just 3 months after the wedding. We weren't wealthy, but Richard worked hard and provided a comfortable life for us. It was the 1980s, and like many couples our age, we fell into traditional roles. He was the breadwinner, and I managed our home. Back then, this arrangement wasn't questioned. It was expected. I put my art dreams aside to create a warm, loving home for our growing family. Michael was born 3 years after Katherine completing our family. My days were filled with diaper changes, meal preparations, doctor appointments, and later school activities. I volunteered for every field trip, baked for every fundraiser, and created Halloween costumes from scratch. Our home became the neighborhood gathering spot because I always had fresh cookies and an open door for our children's friends. Richard's career flourished with my support. When he needed to work late, dinner waited. When he traveled, I handled everything at home. When opportunities for promotion came up in different cities, I packed our belongings and created new homes, leaving behind friends and familiar places. 3 moves in 10 years as Richard climbed the corporate ladder at his firm. Throughout those years, I occasionally took art classes at community centers, painting in our garage late at night after the children were asleep. But my creative pursuits were always secondary to family needs. Richard appreciated my efforts, but viewed art as a hobby, not a career. "Your real masterpieces are our children," he would say. I believed him. Katherine was always different from Michael. Where he was easygoing and affectionate, she was intense and driven from an early age. She organized her toys by color-created study schedules in elementary school and had a 5-year plan by the time she was 16. She took after Richard in many ways, practical, focused, ambitious, but she lacked his warmth, his ability to balance work with genuine human connection. I remember when Katherine was 10, she found me crying after I received news that my mother had been diagnosed with cancer. Instead of offering comfort, she handed me a tissue and said, "Crying won't make Grandma better." Even as a child, emotions confused and frustrated her. I should have recognized then what that might mean for our relationship as adults, but I was too busy trying to help her develop empathy. As our children grew, Richard and I settled into middle age comfortably. He became a partner at his firm, and I found purpose in community volunteering, occasional art shows at local cafes, and later helping with our grandchildren. We planned to travel during retirement, maybe even rent an apartment in Paris for a month, so I could paint the scenes I'd only seen in books. Those dreams ended when Richard began experiencing chest pains at 62. Doctors discovered heart disease, a combination of genetics and the years of stress from his high-pressure career. He made lifestyle changes, took medication, and we adjusted our retirement plans to something less ambitious. "As long as we're together," he would say, "I have everything I need." 3 years later, on an ordinary Tuesday morning, Richard collapsed while getting dressed for work. By the time the ambulance arrived, he was gone. A massive heart attack, the doctors said. Quick and likely painless. But for me, the pain was just beginning. The funeral was a blur of faces and casseroles. Katherine took charge of arrangements while Michael flew in from Seattle with his wife and children. I moved through those days like a ghost, unable to process that Richard was gone forever. Reality crashed in during a meeting with our financial advisor 2 weeks later. Richard had canceled his life insurance policy the year before to reduce monthly expenses, something he never mentioned to me. Our savings had been depleted by medical bills. The house had a substantial mortgage remaining. His pension would provide some income, but nowhere near enough to maintain our lifestyle. "You'll need to sell the house," the advisor explained gently, "and consider your employment options." Employment options. At 63 with no career history, no degree, no professional skills that anyone would value. Just a lifetime of unpaid work, managing a household, raising children, supporting my husband's career, and creating a home that no longer existed. Katherine sat beside me in that meeting, taking notes on her tablet. "You can move in with us," she said later that evening. "We have the guest room." Her voice was practical, not particularly warm, but I was too overwhelmed with gratitude to notice. Just until I figure things out, I promised, not realizing how difficult figuring things out would be for someone my age with my background. The sale of our family home happened quickly. A young couple with 2 small children fell in love with the garden I'd tended for decades. We closed 30 days later, and I found myself sorting through 40 years of belongings, deciding what to keep, what to sell, what to donate. Each item held memories: the couch where we'd cuddled watching movies, the dining table where we'd shared thousands of family meals, the bedroom set Richard and I had saved for during our early marriage. "You can't bring all this stuff, Mom," Katherine said, surveying the items I'd marked to keep. "Our storage space is limited." In the end, I kept photo albums, Richard's wedding ring, a few pieces of jewelry, some clothes, and a small box of art supplies. Everything else went to estate sales or donation centers. It felt like erasing my life piece by piece. Katherine and her husband James lived in an upscale neighborhood in a modern home with clean lines and minimal decoration. The guest room was pristine. Gray walls, white bedding, not a personal touch in sight. Nothing like the warm, slightly cluttered home I'd created with Richard. "The closet is small, so try to keep your things organized," Katherine explained as she showed me around. "The bathroom is shared with the kids, so please keep your toiletries in this caddy, and we prefer shoes off in the house." James was welcoming in his quiet way. He worked in finance, traveled frequently, and seemed to exist primarily in his home office when not at work. Their children, Emma and Noah, were initially excited about having their grandmother live with them. Emma, at 12, was artistic and sensitive, while 8-year-old Noah had endless energy and curiosity. They reminded me of Katherine and Michael at those ages before life's expectations had shaped them. "Can we make cookies together like we used to when we visited?" Emma asked that first weekend. "Of course, sweetheart," I answered, looking to Katherine for approval. "Just clean up thoroughly afterward," Katherine said without looking up from her laptop. "And try to limit the sugar. We're watching their intake." Those first few weeks I tried to make myself useful without overstepping. I cooked dinner when Katherine worked late, which was most nights. I helped the children with homework, drove them to activities when James was traveling, and kept the house tidy. I was careful to follow Katherine's many rules about how things should be done. "We don't use fabric softener on the towels," she corrected when I did laundry. "The children aren't allowed screen time on school nights," she texted when I let Noah play an educational game on a Tuesday. "We don't eat in the living room," she reminded when I brought my coffee to the couch one morning. I tried to be grateful for the roof over my head and access to my grandchildren. But as weeks passed, I felt increasingly like an unwelcome guest rather than family. Katherine scrutinized everything I did, correcting me, constantly making me second-guess myself in tasks I'd performed confidently for decades. At night alone in the guest room, I often cried silently for Richard, for our home, for the life we'd planned together. One evening, Katherine passed by and heard my muffled sobs. "Mom, it's been 2 months," she said from the doorway. "This constant grieving isn't healthy. Maybe you should see someone." No hug, no comfort, just practical advice delivered without warmth. I noticed, too, how Katherine interacted with her own children, checking homework with critical comments, scheduling their activities with military precision, but rarely simply enjoying their company. Emma would show her artwork, and Katherine would nod distractedly while checking emails. Noah would attempt to share a story from school, and she'd cut him off if he took too long getting to the point. One evening at dinner, about 10 weeks after I'd moved in, Katherine brought up the subject of employment. "Mom, have you thought about getting a job? Something to keep you busy and give you some income?" I placed my fork down slowly. At my age, with no work experience, who would hire me? "Lots of places hire seniors," Katherine replied. "Grocery stores, retail shops. You could be a greeter or cashier." The thought terrified me. I'd never worked outside our home. Richard had handled all our finances, all our business interactions. The idea of entering the workforce at 63 seemed impossible. "I could contribute more around the house instead," I offered. "I'm already cooking and helping with the kids." "That's not the same as financial contribution," Katherine said. "James and I have our own expenses. Having another adult in the house costs money." James looked uncomfortable but said nothing, his usual response when Katherine and I had tense conversations. That night marked a turning point. What had begun as a supposedly temporary housing solution was clearly becoming a source of resentment for my daughter, and for me, a source of deepening anxiety. 3 months into my stay, the atmosphere in Katherine's house had become unbearable. Her criticism escalated from gentle corrections to harsh judgments about everything I did. Nothing was right. Not how I folded laundry, not how I organized the pantry, not even how I spoke to my own grandchildren. "Please don't tell Noah he's smart when he gets math problems wrong," she said one afternoon. "We believe in accurate feedback, not empty praise." "But encouragement helps children learn," I countered, drawing on decades of parenting experience. Katherine's eyes narrowed. "Mom-child development research has evolved since the 1980s. We're raising our children based on current best practices, not outdated sentimentality." The list of restrictions grew weekly. Don't answer the door when the bell rings. Don't use the good dishes for everyday meals. Don't rearrange anything in the kitchen. Don't mention to the neighbors that you're living here temporarily. It makes us look unstable. Emma and Noah still sought me out for comfort and fun, but Katherine began limiting our interactions. "They need to focus on homework," she'd say, or "they have scheduled activities." I watched my grandchildren becoming as tightly wound as their mother, their natural joy suppressed under expectations of perfection. James traveled more frequently, avoiding the tension at home. When present, he attempted small kindnesses, bringing me tea, asking about my day, but always with one eye on Katherine's reaction. He was kind, but conflict-averse, unwilling to challenge his wife's treatment of her mother. The financial comments became more frequent and pointed. "Do you know how much our utility bills have increased since you moved in?" Katherine asked over breakfast one morning. "Our grocery budget is completely off track. she noted while unloading shopping bags. The hot water heater isn't meant to support 3 showers each morning, she commented when I came downstairs freshly bathed. I offered the small amount of money I'd received from the house sale after paying off the mortgage. I'd be happy to contribute, I said, pushing the check across the table. Katherine looked at the amount and scoffed. This might cover 1 month of what you're costing us. And then what? The breaking point came when I accidentally knocked over an expensive vase while dusting. It had been placed precariously on a narrow shelf, and my sleeve caught it as I reached above. The crash brought Katherine running from her home office. That was an anniversary gift from James, she shouted, staring at the shattered pieces. I'm so sorry, I said, already kneeling to clean up the mess. I'll replace it. With what money? Katherine demanded. You have no income, no savings. You live here completely at our expense, contributing nothing. I contribute in other ways, I said quietly. I cook, I clean, I care for the children. Things I could pay a housekeeper to do better and with fewer complications, she snapped. I stood slowly, my knees aching from the hardwood floor. Katherine, I'm your mother, not your housekeeper. And I'm not your retirement plan, she shouted. Dad didn't prepare, and now that's somehow my problem. I have my own family to support, my own future to secure. I never asked to be in this position, I said, my voice breaking. Do you think I wanted to lose your father, to lose our home? Everything I've known. Katherine pointed at the front door, her face flushed with anger. You either get a job to pay your way, or you're sleeping on the street. I'm done supporting a capable adult who refuses to support herself. I stood frozen, unable to believe these words were coming from the little girl I'd nursed through fevers, taught to read, comforted through teenage heartbreaks. How had that sweet child become this cold, calculating woman? That night I lay awake in the guest bed that never felt like mine, staring at the ceiling, wondering where I'd gone wrong as a mother. Had I spoiled Katherine? Had I failed to teach her compassion? Or was this who she'd always been beneath the surface, and I'd been too blind to see it? The next morning I went to the public library and asked a young librarian for help creating a resume. She looked surprised when I admitted I'd never had a paying job, but recovered quickly and showed me to a computer. Let's focus on your transferable skills, she suggested kindly. Household management involves budgeting, scheduling, conflict resolution, all valuable workplace abilities. I stared at the blank document on the screen, the cursor blinking accusingly. What skills did I have that anyone would pay for? I could cook family meals, but not professionally. I could keep a home clean, but not to commercial standards. I could nurture children, but I had no formal education credentials. The librarian directed me to the Career Center in the back of the library, where volunteers helped job seekers. A retired gentleman named Frank spent an hour walking me through the basics of modern job searching, something completely foreign to me. Most applications are online now, he explained. You'll need an email address and basic computer skills. I'd used Richard's email for family communications and had only basic knowledge of our home computer. Everything Frank said highlighted how unprepared I was for the modern workforce. Nevertheless, I spent that day creating my first email account, drafting a resume that seemed embarrassingly sparse, and learning how to search job listings online. By closing time, my eyes burned from staring at the screen, and my self-confidence had plummeted even further. The next day, I returned and applied for 5 positions: cashier, at a grocery store receptionist, at a hair salon sales associate, at a clothing boutique greeter at a department store, and assistant at a flower shop. The last one sparked a small flicker of interest. I'd always loved arranging flowers from our garden. Don't get discouraged if you don't hear back right away, Frank advised. Job searching takes time. Time was something Katherine wasn't willing to give me. Each evening she asked about my progress. Each morning she reminded me of my need to contribute financially. The pressure was constant and crushing. My first interview was at the grocery store. The manager, a man half my age, reviewed my application with poorly concealed skepticism. No retail experience at all, he confirmed. No, but I'm a quick learner, I assured him. And I'm very good with people. The register system requires computer proficiency, he explained. And the job involves standing for 8-hour shifts. At your age. He didn't finish the sentence, but his meaning was clear. I didn't get that job or the next or the one after that. No one said it was because of my age. That would be illegal, but the message was conveyed in other ways. We're looking for someone who can grow with the company. This position is fast-paced and high energy. We need someone comfortable with the latest technology. After 2 weeks of rejections, I expanded my search. I took free computer tutorials at the library, staying until closing time to practice email word processing and internet searching. I watched YouTube videos on basic office skills. I even borrowed books on resume writing and interviewing techniques. To generate some immediate income, I posted flyers at the library offering babysitting services. A young couple 3 blocks from Katherine's house hired me to watch their toddler 2 afternoons a week while the mother attended classes. The pay was minimal, but it gave me something to report to Katherine. $20 for 3 hours, that's below minimum wage, she scoffed when I told her. That's pocket change, not meaningful contribution. My younger son Michael called weekly from Seattle. During one call, I broke down and admitted how difficult things had become with Katherine. Move here, Mom, he urged. We have a spare room. Lisa and the kids would love having you. The offer was tempting, but I knew Michael's house was already crowded with 3 children. His graphic design business was just beginning to succeed after years of struggle. The last thing he needed was another financial responsibility. I need to figure this out here, I told him. But thank you, sweetheart. At least let me send some money, he offered. I declined, though it broke my heart to do so. I'd already burdened one child. I wouldn't do the same to another. A month after her ultimatum, Katherine set a deadline. You have 30 more days to find real employment, she announced over dinner. After that, we need to discuss alternative living arrangements. Emma, now 13, looked up from her plate in alarm. Are you making Grandma leave? Adult problems don't concern you, Katherine replied sharply. But where would Grandma go? Noah asked, his 8-year-old face scrunched with worry. That's for Grandma to figure out, Katherine said. Everyone needs to be responsible for themselves. Later that evening, Emma slipped into my room and hugged me fiercely. I don't want you to leave, she whispered. Don't worry, sweetheart, I assured her, though my own stomach was tied in knots. Grown-ups sometimes disagree, but we work things out. I wasn't sure I believed my own words, but I couldn't bear adding to my granddaughter's distress. In my darkest moments, I wondered if life was worth the struggle. Richard was gone. My daughter seemed to hate me. My home was sold. My identity as wife, mother, homemaker, the only identity I'd known for 40 years, had vanished. At 63, I was starting from nothing with no clear path forward. It was a flyer at the library that led me to a local support group for widows. At my first meeting, I sat silently as women shared stories of grief, financial challenges, and rebuilding lives. So many echoed my own experiences. Women of my generation who dedicated themselves to family only to find themselves adrift after their husbands died. There I met Susan, a 68-year-old widow who'd faced similar circumstances 5 years earlier. After her husband's death, she'd moved in with her son, endured a difficult adjustment period, then discovered unexpected talents and built a new life for herself. "I was a housewife for 45 years, she told me after the meeting. "Now I manage a small bookshop and live in my own apartment. If I could do it, you can too." For the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. Not much, but enough to keep going. On a Tuesday afternoon while buying groceries for dinner, I literally bumped carts with Mrs. Peterson, who'd lived across the street from Richard and me for 15 years before moving to a retirement community. "Valerie, how wonderful to see you," she exclaimed. "I've thought of you so often since Richard passed. How are you managing, dear?" Something about her genuine concern broke through my carefully maintained facade. Before I could stop myself, I was telling her everything. Living with Katherine, the ultimatum, my failed job search, the looming deadline. Mrs. Peterson listened attentively, then took my hand. "You know, I've been volunteering at the Riverside Community Center, and they're looking for someone to teach an art class for seniors. I remember those beautiful paintings you used to do. Have you considered something like that?" I shook my head. "I haven't painted seriously in decades." "But you could," she insisted. "You had real talent, Valerie. And they're desperate since their previous instructor moved away. It's only twice a week to start." The idea seemed far-fetched, but later that evening I mentioned it to Susan from the widows group over coffee. "That's perfect for you," she exclaimed. "You're always talking about how much you loved art before life got in the way." "But I'm not qualified to teach," I protested. "I never even finished my degree." "They're probably not looking for a professor," Susan reasoned. "Just someone who can guide beginners, create a positive atmosphere. You'd be wonderful at that." With Susan's encouragement, I dug through my storage boxes in Katherine's basement, finding a portfolio of work from my community college classes years ago. The watercolors and sketches were amateurish to my critical eye, but they demonstrated basic techniques. The next day I called the community center and spoke with the director, Angela Martinez, who agreed to meet with me that afternoon. I dressed in my most professional outfit, navy slacks and a blouse I'd worn to Richard's office parties, and arrived 30 minutes early, clutching my portfolio with trembling hands. Angela was younger than I expected, maybe early 40s, with a warm smile and practical manner. "Mrs. Peterson speaks very highly of you," she said as we sat in her small office. "She mentioned you have an art background." "Informal training," I admitted. "I studied for 2 years in college before starting our family, then took community classes over the years." I opened my portfolio, explaining each piece, surprised to find myself speaking with growing confidence about techniques and materials. Angela asked thoughtful questions about how I might structure classes for seniors with varying abilities. "Many of our participants are looking for creative outlet and social connection," she explained. "Technical expertise is less important than creating an encouraging environment." To my astonishment, she offered me the position on the spot. 2 classes per week, to start with potential for more if enrollment increased. The pay was modest, barely above minimum wage, but it was legitimate employment. "We can't offer benefits for part-time instructors," Angela apologized, "but many find this work very rewarding in other ways." I floated home excited to share my news with Katherine. For the first time since moving in, I felt a spark of independence, of potential. Katherine was in the kitchen reviewing work documents when I arrived. I took a deep breath and announced, "I found a job teaching art at the Riverside Community Center. I start next week." She looked up briefly. "Teaching art? What are the hours and salary?" I explained the part-time schedule and modest pay rate. She calculated quickly. "That's barely $400 a month." Our agreement was that you'd contribute meaningfully to expenses. My brief moment of pride deflated. It's a start, I said quietly. And there's potential for more classes. Potential doesn't pay bills, Katherine replied, returning to her documents. But I suppose it's better than nothing. That night, James knocked softly on my door. When I opened it, he handed me a cup of tea. "Congratulations on the job," he said. "Katherine may not show it, but any progress is good progress." "Does she really want me gone?" I asked directly. James sighed. "Katherine struggles with unexpected changes to her plans. Having you here wasn't part of her 5-year strategy, but deep down she does care." I wasn't convinced, but I appreciated his attempt at encouragement. My first art class was scheduled for Wednesday morning. I spent hours preparing, reviewing basic watercolor techniques, creating simple example pieces listing supplies we'd need. Despite my preparation, I barely slept the night before, terrified of embarrassing myself or disappointing my students. I arrived an hour early to set up the classroom, arranging tables, preparing water cups, setting out the supplies Angela had purchased. As the clock ticked closer to 10 a.m., my stomach knotted with anxiety. The first student arrived 10 minutes early, a gentleman in his 70s using a cane. "Herbert Wilson," he introduced himself. "Never painted a day in my life, but my doctor says I need new hobbies." By starting time, 8 seniors had gathered, ranging in age from early 60s to late 80s. Some had dabbled in art before. Others, like Herbert, were complete beginners. All seemed eager to learn and grateful for the opportunity. I took a deep breath and began. "Welcome to Beginner's Watercolor. I'm Valerie Thompson, and we're going to explore this beautiful medium together." To my surprise, once I started talking about art, something I'd loved my entire life, my nervousness disappeared. I demonstrated simple techniques, helping each student individually, praising sincere efforts, gently suggesting improvements. The 2-hour class passed in what felt like minutes. "Same time next week?" Herbert asked as they packed up. "I'll be here." I promised, feeling a warmth I hadn't experienced in months. Angela stopped by as I was cleaning up. "That went wonderfully," she said. The participants were engaged and smiling. "How did it feel for you?" "Like coming home," I admitted. I'd forgotten how much I love this. "We have a children's class on Saturday mornings that needs an instructor," she mentioned. "Would you be interested in taking that on as well? It's another 4 hours weekly." I accepted, immediately grateful for both the additional income and the chance to spend more time doing something meaningful. Katherine remained unimpressed by my new role. "Art classes aren't exactly career advancement," she commented, "and you're still far short of what you need to support yourself." But something had changed inside me. For the first time since Richard's death, I had a purpose beyond survival, beyond being tolerated in my daughter's home. I had something that was mine alone, not connected to being a wife, mother, or grandmother, but stemming from my own abilities and passions. It wasn't enough to solve my housing crisis, not yet. But it was a beginning, a small flame of hope in what had been overwhelming darkness. 3 months into my teaching position at the community center, subtle but significant changes had occurred both in my circumstances and in myself. My initial 2 classes had expanded to 4, 2 for seniors, 1 for children, and a new Art for Relaxation evening class for working adults seeking stress relief. The additional hours meant my income, while still modest, had more than doubled. More importantly, my confidence had grown enormously. I no longer second-guessed every decision or apologized for taking up space. The timid, grief-stricken widow who'd moved into Katherine's guest room was gradually being replaced by a woman with purpose and growing self-assurance. My artistic skills, dormant for decades, flourished with regular practice. I stayed after classes to work on my own projects, developing techniques I taught my students the following week. Angela provided a small storage area where I could keep supplies and works in progress, creating a tiny studio space that became my sanctuary. The transformation didn't go unnoticed. Students sought my advice, valued my instruction, and treated me with a respect that had been lacking in my daughter's home. Several asked about private lessons, which I began offering on Sunday afternoons in the community center's small courtyard when weather permitted. My expanding schedule meant less time at Katherine's house, reducing our conflicts, but also my interactions with Emma and Noah. I missed them terribly, but recognized that some distance might be healthier for everyone. When I was home, I made our time together count. Helping with homework, listening to their stories, being fully present in ways their busy parents often weren't. Everything changed when a local arts magazine featured a small article about the community center's programs, including a photograph of me teaching the seniors class, and a quote about finding my artistic voice again at 63. The article was complimentary, describing me as a late-blooming art instructor whose personal renaissance inspires her students. Katherine saw the magazine when it arrived in the mail. "You're using our address for publicity?" she asked, tossing the open magazine on the kitchen counter. "I didn't seek that article," I explained. The reporter visited the center for a broader story about community arts programs. "And now everyone knows my mother is teaching finger painting to senior citizens." Her voice dripped with disdain. Something snapped inside me after months of belittlement. "It's watercolor, not finger painting, and I'm good at it. My classes have waiting lists now." "It's still just a hobby," she dismissed. "No, Katherine, it's my career now," I stated firmly. "At 63, I've found work I love and excel at. That should make you proud, not embarrassed." Katherine stared at me as if seeing me clearly for the first time. "You were always like this," she said coldly. "So pathetic, depending on Dad for everything, never standing on your own feet." The words stung, but I maintained my composure. "I made choices that were common for women of my generation. I supported your father so he could build his career while I raised you and Michael. Those contributions had value even if they didn't come with a paycheck. Those choices left you completely unprepared for real life," Katherine shot back. "And now you expect everyone to accommodate your lack of planning." "I never expected to lose your father at 65, I said quietly. "We had plans, insurance, retirement accounts. Things went wrong. Life does that sometimes." Emma had entered the kitchen during our exchange. "Mom, why are you so mean to Grandma?" she asked. Her young face troubled. Katherine turned to her daughter, visibly trying to control her temper. "This is an adult conversation, Emma. Please go to your room." "But you're being unfair," Emma persisted. "Grandma works really hard. I've seen her paintings. They're beautiful." "Emma now," Katherine ordered. After Emma reluctantly left, Katherine turned back to me. "This isn't working. You have 2 weeks to find somewhere else to live. I can't have you undermining my authority with my children." "Katherine, please," I began. 2 weeks, she repeated. "James and I have discussed it and we're in agreement." Later that evening, James sought me out. "I want you to know I never agreed to the 2-week timeline," he said quietly. "I told Katherine we should wait until you found suitable housing, regardless of how long it takes." It was the first time I'd seen him directly contradict his wife. "Thank you, James, but maybe this is for the best. The situation isn't healthy for any of us, especially the children." That night I called Susan from the widows group. "Katherine's asked me to leave." I explained, trying to keep my voice steady. "Oh, Valerie," Susan sighed. "I've been half expecting this. Listen, my spare room is yours for as long as you need it. No pressure, no timelines." Her generosity brought tears to my eyes. "Are you sure I don't want to burden another household?" "You're not a burden, you're my friend," Susan replied firmly. "And it's temporary until you find your feet. That's what friends do for each other." The next day, I began packing my few belongings. Emma came in and sat on the bed watching me fold clothes. "I don't want you to go," she said, tears in her eyes. I sat beside her and took her hand. "Sometimes adults need space from each other, even when they love each other. Your mom and I have different ways of seeing the world right now." "She's always angry," Emma confided. "Not just at you, at everyone. Dad, Noah, me. Nothing is ever good enough." I chose my words carefully, not wanting to criticize Katherine, but recognizing Emma's need for honesty. "Your mom is under a lot of pressure. She works very hard to provide for your family and maintain the lifestyle you have. Sometimes that pressure makes it difficult for her to show her feelings. Did she used to be different when she was my age?" "She was always driven and focused," I said. "But yes, there was a softness too, especially when she was creating something. She used to draw beautiful horses." Emma looked surprised. "Mom used to draw. For hours. She had dozens of sketchbooks. I have some in storage, actually. I could show you sometime." This small connection, this thread between generations, felt precious and fragile. I vowed to maintain it somehow despite the coming separation. Moving into Susan's spare room was both a relief and a new source of anxiety. Relief from the constant tension at Katherine's, but anxiety about imposing on my new friend's generosity and about my uncertain future. Susan's home was modest but comfortable, a small 2-bedroom house in an older neighborhood. My room had just enough space for a twin-bed small dresser and corner desk. After the pristine guest room at Katherine's, it felt wonderfully lived in and welcoming. "Make yourself at home," Susan insisted. "Stay as long as you need to get established." I was determined not to repeat the dependent role I'd fallen into at Katherine's. I contributed to groceries from my teaching income, cooked several nights a week, and kept common areas tidy. Susan and I quickly developed comfortable routines, our similar experiences as widows creating an unspoken understanding. At the community center, my responsibilities continued to expand. Angela offered me a small office space that previous instructors had used as a studio. "You're here often enough to need your own workspace," she explained, "and it might help with those private lessons students keep requesting." The office was barely larger than a closet, but it had a north-facing window that provided perfect light for painting. I arranged my growing collection of supplies, hung a few finished pieces, and suddenly had a legitimate studio space, something I'd dreamed of for decades. Commissions began to come in, small ones at first. A student wanted a watercolor of her childhood home for her mother's birthday. Another asked me to paint his beloved dog who had recently passed away. A local coffee shop owner saw my work and asked if I'd create several pieces for their walls, with price tags for potential sale. I opened my first checking account in my own name at 63 years old. The bank officer didn't bat an eye, but for me, it represented a profound step toward independence. Each deposit, however small, built my confidence along with my balance. James brought Emma and Noah to visit one weekend. "Katherine's at a work retreat," he explained. "The kids have been asking about you." We spent the afternoon at a nearby park, then returned to Susan's for cookies and art time. I showed Emma some simple watercolor techniques, and Noah created an elaborate crayon drawing of superheroes. For a few hours, everything felt normal and joyful. As they were leaving, Emma hugged me tightly. "Mom said we can't come to your art class because it's during school, but maybe in summer." "I'd love that," I said, blinking back tears. Apartment hunting became my second job. My income was still too limited for most rentals in our area, and my lack of credit history posed an additional barrier. Each rejection reinforced my determination to somehow make this work. Susan suggested looking into senior living communities, some of which offered subsidized units. "They're not nursing homes," she clarified. "Many are just apartment complexes with age restrictions and some shared amenities." I toured several facilities, finding them nicer than expected, but still beyond my means without significant income increases. One manager suggested I check back in a few months when additional subsidized units might become available. "You need to demonstrate stable income for at least 6 months, she advised. "Keep track of all your teaching hours, sales commissions, everything that shows you can support yourself." 3 months after moving to Susan's, I spotted a listing for a small studio apartment in an older building within walking distance of the community center. The rent was at the very top of what I could afford, leaving almost nothing for savings, but location would save me transportation costs. The building manager, Mr. Finley, was a kind man in his 70s who took an interest in my situation. "You remind me of my late wife," he said after I explained my circumstances. "She was an artist too, always had paint under her fingernails." The apartment was tiny. Essentially, one room with a kitchenette along one wall and a small bathroom, but it had decent light, was clean and well-maintained, and most importantly would be mine. "I'll need first month's rent and security deposit," Mr. Finley said, "but I can waive the credit check if you can provide reference letters from your employers." Angela wrote a glowing letter about my work at the community center. Susan provided a character reference. Even James sent a letter confirming my previous address and reliability. On moving day, Susan helped me transport my few belongings from her home to my new apartment. Michael had sent money for basics: a bed, small table, 2 chairs, and cooking essentials. "Consider it payback for all those years of college care packages," he insisted when I tried to refuse. Standing in my tiny apartment that first evening, I felt a mixture of terror and exhilaration. At 63, I was truly on my own for the first time in my life. No husband, no family home, no adult child's spare room. Just me, my growing art business, and a key to a place that was mine alone. I arranged my art supplies by the window, made the bed with linens Susan had gifted me, and placed the single photo I had of Richard on the bedside table. "Well, this wasn't the retirement plan," I whispered to his image. "But I'm doing it, Richard. I'm finding my way." That night, I slept better than I had in months, despite the unfamiliar surroundings and uncertain future. Something fundamental had shifted inside me. A recognition that I was capable of more than I'd ever imagined. The first weeks in my studio apartment established new routines and rhythms. Mornings began early. Coffee while watching sunrise color the sky through my single window, then walking to the community center for classes or private lessons. Evenings were for my own artwork, simple meals at my small table, and occasional visits with Susan or other friends from the widows group. My relationship with Katherine remained strained but civil. James would bring the children to visit every other weekend, often meeting at a park or the community center where Emma could join my children's art class. These visits were precious but bittersweet, reinforcing both my love for my grandchildren and the distance from my daughter. One Tuesday evening, an unexpected knock came at my door. When I opened it, Katherine stood there stiff and uncomfortable. "May I come in?" she asked formally. I stepped aside, surprised and apprehensive. She surveyed my small space with an unreadable expression. It's compact, but it works for me, I said, feeling defensive despite myself. Katherine nodded. Emma's been asking about spending more time with you. Her art teacher at school said she shows real talent and mentioned your classes at the community center. She does have a natural eye for composition. I agreed. She reminds me of you at that age. Katherine looked surprised. I wasn't artistic. You were, actually. You filled dozens of sketchbooks with horse drawings. Don't you remember? A flicker of something, recognition, perhaps nostalgia, crossed her face before she resumed her businesslike manner. We've been discussing whether Emma could attend your Saturday class regularly, if that would be acceptable to you. Of course it would, I said warmly. I'd love to have her. And perhaps, Katherine continued, each word seeming difficult, we could establish a regular schedule for you to visit. Sunday dinners, perhaps. The children miss you. It wasn't an apology or an admission of wrongdoing, but from Katherine, this awkward olive branch represented significant effort. I'd like that very much, I said simply. As she turned to leave, she paused. The article in the arts magazine. Some of my colleagues mentioned it. They were impressed. One asked if you take adult students. I do, I confirmed. Several evenings a week. She nodded. I'll pass that along. It wasn't reconciliation, not really, but it was acknowledgement of my new life, my developing career, my existence beyond her home. From Katherine, that felt momentous. The holiday season brought new challenges. It would be my first Christmas without Richard, and now without the daily presence of my grandchildren as well. The combination threatened to overwhelm me with grief and loneliness. Susan recognized my struggle. First holidays are the hardest, she said. Let's make new traditions instead of mourning the old ones. Together with other members of the widows group, we planned a Christmas Eve potluck. I spent days creating handmade cards and small painted ornaments as gifts. The gathering wasn't the family Christmas I'd known for decades, but it brought unexpected warmth and connection. Katherine invited me for Christmas Day dinner, another small step toward normalcy. I brought gifts for the children and a peace offering for Katherine and James, a small watercolor of their home in summer garden in full bloom. Katherine's thank you seemed genuinely touched. As winter turned to spring, I marked 1 year since Richard's death with a quiet day of remembrance. I visited his grave, placing fresh flowers and spending time in conversation with him, updating him on all that had changed. I think you'd be proud, I told him. I'm not who I expected to be at this stage of life, but I'm finding my way. That evening, Michael flew in from Seattle for a surprise visit. I wanted to be with you today, he explained, hugging me tightly. And I wanted to see this new life you've built. He toured my tiny apartment, visited the community center, and met Susan and other important people in my new world. Mom, this is incredible, he said as we walked through the gallery where several of my paintings were now displayed for sale. You've created something meaningful from scratch at a time when most people would have given up. I almost did give up, I admitted. Those first months at Katherine's, I couldn't see any way forward. Speaking of my dear sister, Michael said carefully, how are things there? Improving slowly, I replied. We'll never have the relationship I wish for, but we're finding a workable peace. Michael nodded. She takes after Dad in some ways, practical to a fault, emotions carefully controlled, but without his warmth. The observation was painfully accurate, but helped me see Katherine with greater compassion. She was who she was, a product of her innate personality and the examples set before her. Understanding didn't excuse her cruelty, but it helped me navigate our evolving relationship with fewer expectations. A week after Michael's visit, Angela approached me with surprising news. The Downtown Arts Alliance is offering small exhibition spaces to local artists. I submitted your portfolio without telling you. Hope that's okay. They've offered you a corner of their gallery for a month-long show. I stared at her, speechless. It's not huge, she clarified quickly. Just space for maybe 10 pieces. But it's legitimate gallery exposure, Valerie. They believe in your work. That evening, I called Katherine with the news, nervous about her reaction, but wanting to share this milestone. To my surprise, she responded with genuine interest, asking questions about the selection process and which paintings I would include. Would you like us to attend the opening? She asked, catching me completely off guard. Yes, I said quickly. Yes, I'd love that. Emma will be thrilled, she said. She tells everyone her grandmother is a famous artist. I laughed. Hardly famous. In her eyes, you are. There was a pause. In some ways, you've accomplished something I never had the courage to do, following a passion without guarantees. I admire that. The words so unexpected brought tears to my eyes. Thank you, Katherine. That means a great deal. For the opening night of my small exhibition, I wore a new dress purchased specifically for the occasion, my first non-essential clothing purchase in over a year. Susan came early to help me prepare emotionally for the event. Several students attended to show support. Angela brought colleagues from the community center, and true to her word, Katherine arrived with James and the children all dressed formally as if attending an important occasion. Emma ran to hug me immediately, while Noah examined each painting with exaggerated seriousness before declaring his favorite. Katherine moved through the space, slowly studying each piece. These are truly beautiful, Mom, she said finally. You found your calling. Better late than never, I replied with a small smile. Maybe that's a lesson for all of us, she said, meeting my eyes directly. It's never too late to change direction. I knew she wasn't just talking about art careers. Our relationship had weathered a terrible storm and emerged altered but intact. The damage couldn't be undone, but healing had begun. That night, after everyone had left, and I returned to my small apartment, I felt a sense of completion I hadn't experienced since Richard's death. Not because everything was perfect. My finances remained precarious, my relationship with Katherine still fragile, my future uncertain in many ways. But I had survived the unthinkable. I had rebuilt from nothing. I had discovered strength I never knew I possessed. Life had forced me to change in ways I would never have chosen. My daughter's ultimatum, cruel as it was, had pushed me toward independence I might never have found otherwise. The journey from dependent wife to self-sufficient artist had been painful beyond measure, but had revealed capacities I never knew I possessed. At 64, I wasn't who I'd expected to be. I was someone new, someone stronger, someone entirely my own creation. And that perhaps was the most beautiful artwork of all. Have you ever had to reinvent yourself late in life or navigate difficult family relationships while trying to stay true to yourself? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. This journey has taught me that it's never too late to discover new strengths and build meaningful connections. If my story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more real-life journeys of resilience and growth. And if you know someone facing similar challenges, please share this video. Sometimes knowing we're not alone makes all the difference. Thank you for being part of this community where we can share our truths and support each other through life's unexpected turns.